Anyway, I want to welcome y'all to the J Research Facility. This is one of two campuses that we have. We have a campus on the campus of Pensacola State in Milton as well, where we conduct our teaching program. So we're at both places. We do a lot of our research out here. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Michael Garcia. He's an interesting guy. I went out to dinner with him last night. He's been a writer in his professional life and a photographer, and he's lived in the Middle East. And so when he was over there, he developed a real passion for olives, and so he started the Florida Olive Growers Council, and tries to promote olives all around the state. So today he's got two speakers that are joining us, Mr. Don Mueller from Jackson County, Florida, who has an operation. He's been in it for a while, so you'll gain from his experience. And also Mr. Kevin Shaw, who is a grower in South Georgia. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Michael, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. My name is Michael Garcia. I'm with the Florida Olive Council, and I just want to thank Wes and all his team here. They've just been really good and making this real easy on me anyway in terms of getting olives together. And you're in luck today. We have a couple of speakers with us today that have actually grown olives and are right now doing it. So and they've got a broad experience. We have Don Mueller over here, who you're going to hear from. Second speaker.
That's the real experience.
Now, yeah, there you go. Don, we call him the godfather of Florida olives. He's had a farm up by Jackson County, Marianna up there, I guess, 12, 15 years or something, in quite a while. Then we have Kevin Shaw here, and Kevin has an operation in Lakeland, Georgia, just above the Florida line up there. And if he gets real successful, we're talking to the governor about maybe going up there and sucking him on down in here, you know. But no, they've been very successful, and you're going to hear from him about super high density. Don Mueller will be talking to you about a small farm type operation, and then Kevin is going to talk about what we call super high density. Let me just run through here just a second if I can operate this machine. This is a little story about us and what we do. The Florida Olive Council, we're a nonprofit, and we're set up under the law of the state of Florida. And basically what we're trying to do is work with the university and private people to plant olives in Florida and to, plant olives in Florida in a number of different places and be able to look at different varieties and see how they do. So Wes has been kind enough to agree to put in some olives up here. We're going to have a little test plot up here, a varietal trial. Eventually, we're putting in 12 different varieties up here, which we brought here. And we're going to have another 12 or 15 varieties next year we're going to put in, and then we'll have we're going to have a little super high density grove for demonstration purposes. So if you can go to our website at www.floridaolivecouncil.org, and we'll give you a little more information. Here's some other folks around Florida that are growing olives at this time. You see Don Mueller, the godfather, up here on top left. And below him is John Ghost. He works for Likes Brothers. And Likes Brothers, as you know, is a large agribusiness here in Florida. They're interested in olives, and they've got a little test plot outside of Camp Mac, which is over by Lake Wales. Richard Williams and Alex Ford are two growers down at DeLeon Springs, and they have 20 acres down there of super high density. Jonathan Carter, who's another olive grower, he's up by Live Oak. He's got about 20-25 acres. In fact, the Shaw brothers were put that grove in for him. They do contract work. If any of y'all are interested in a larger operation, Kevin can talk to you about that on that basis. Tony Valenza, below him, he's an olive nurseryman, and he's been in business in Citra, Florida, which is near Ocala and Gainesville, for a number of years. Tommy Olson is another olive grower over in Hastings, and he's got about 10 or 12 years. And all these people we kind of keep in touch with the Olive Council, so whenever we have questions, we can go to them and ask them questions. And they have a broad experience in growing olives in Florida. And as you know, You can talk about growing olives in California, you can talk about growing olives in Spain, you can talk about growing olives in Tunisia, whatever, in Israel, but at the end of the day, until you plant in your own soil and see how they do in your soil, you really don't know. And so that's our goal, that's what we're doing. And here's a few other folks. These are just backyard folks that have olive trees in their backyard. Mary Elizabeth, you see her standing next, that's a 4-year-old Arbequina tree Mary Elizabeth has. She has 2 of them in her front yard. You see down in Ocala, John L. Boscus, who's with IFAS down there, he's a small farms agent. Behind him is a 10-year-old, probably almost 11-year-old Arbequina tree, and that's down in Ocala. This Dana Benrick's another grower. That's not an olive tree. He's got a lot of different trees down there. He's a retired IFAS agent. And then we've got some young people involved, Lisa Edwards in Sarasota. You see in St. Augustine there, Henry Boss, that's another tree that tree is very close by the ocean. So they're grown in the sand down there basically. And then in Claremont, Vicki Danielle's got about 5 acres. She just put in a high density grove down there. This slide shows you kind of where the some of the olive operations are in Florida. There are others, there's a few others, but these are the main ones. And then just to talk about a little bit about the economics here so you can get a perspective on what we're trying to do in the long run. 98% of the olive oil is consumed, of the olive oil is consumed in the United States. We consume about 80-90 million gallons a year. That's about a quart per person. 98% is imported. So when you talk about market opportunity, there's a tremendous market opportunity for olive oil here in the United States. Another interesting fact is the olives is very, very conservative in terms of water use. So they're not all they like water. They don't like a lot of it. They don't like wet feet. But these growers can talk to you about that. But they're very economic in terms of the way you can work with them in the agriculture. And the community impact, and we talked a little bit about it earlier. As you know, Florida's got some real problems with citrus right now. So there are a lot of citrus people looking into this. My personal opinion is, I think, and I think y'all agree, I think West Florida has a tremendous opportunity because you do have the chill hours here that are necessary to set fruit and olives, and you have the drain soils. So I think probably of all Florida, West Florida has the highest potential to have a successful olive industry. So if you have any questions for me, I'm glad to take them, but if you really want to ask questions, there's 2 gentlemen here that can really answer your questions for you. So did you have...
Well, there were 2 operations you showed over this way. One is Don. Who's the other?
There's one in Live Oak. That's right outside of Gainesville. There's a few in this area.
Yeah, there were 2.
Yeah, there's a guy. There was one gentleman, Mazzarino. He's got a little operation up here, and I don't know exactly. I think he's not far from here. I forget the town. But there's probably more out here. I've only been able to, these are ones that I've found and sort of, so we're slowly getting people to contact the Olive Council. We're getting them registered, and we're trying to understand what they're growing and where they're growing. So we're in the process of gathering information, so we're sort of new on it. Yes, ma'am.
Are those folks, are they on your website?
Yes, they are. And if you have any questions, my email address is on my website, and the telephone number. So just give me a call, and if you want to talk to any of those folks or meet any of them, I'm glad to afford you that opportunity. Yes, Wes?
Michael, we do have an olive grower right across the street. He's put in a grove, Mike Thomas. He's here with us today.
All right.
He's over in, raise your hand.
Mike?
Mike?
Okay.
So we've got interest right here.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for coming.
Well, hello everybody, and that's neat that you have trees that close to here. I mean, just from Gayla driving me up today from we spent the night in Pensacola and driving up. I mean, the potential here is just, I mean, it's enormous because of to me the fact that you've got the well-drained soils, and you've got, it's almost like what Don has spoke about at his place, where it's somewhat of a microclimate, and you've got, you get cold, but you don't get too cold. I mean, you got the effects. How far are we from the Gulf here? I mean,
Probably 30 miles.
30 miles is the way the crow flies.
Maybe not that far.
So, I mean, it definitely affects the weather here without a doubt. But, you know, traditional orchards been grown for thousands of years, and they, you know, the production practices are, you know, they haven't changed a whole lot in those years. But, you know, in the last, I guess it was about 22 years ago or so, in Barcelona, Spain, they put in the first super high density orchards. And the super high density orchards, instead of having 100 to 150 trees an acre, you're talking about anywhere from 6 to almost 700 trees an acre. The 600 trees would be a 6 by 12 spacing, and the 5 by 13 spacing would give you about 670 trees per acre. Like I say, this system was first implemented in Barcelona, Spain, approximately 22 years ago, and I think there were several reasons for this, for them to pursue this, you know, this system. And one, you know, it would maximize the use of the land, of the per acre or per hectare land, and it also was to try to reduce labor costs. And the labor cost, you know, you do have some initial labor cost up front, you know, with you know, tying the trees up, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. But it's the major labor cost reduction is at harvest time, and it allows for mechanized harvest. And I mean, it's to see the Oxbow harvester run through there and pick the olives versus Don and Jason and Luis and Victor and I out there shaking those trees and picking them up in the net. It's you can see how fast, I mean, you know, how much it speeds up the process. You know, another thing that we've realized, or you know, I guess the Spanish realized, and we have realized in our own orchards, is that the super high density system pushes the trees into production faster, and I think that they're seeing this in the citrus industry as well because of the greening. They're doing super high density on the citrus and pushing them into production faster, so before the greening takes over and they have the problems, and then they're getting production. And this is a similar principle with the super high density olives, is that you know, we harvested some trees, and now this was a little bit market oriented, that we harvested at 2.5 years old. We just really needed to, you know, we needed to see some, you know, oil that was, you know, mechanically harvested. We needed the fruit mechanically harvested and pressed oil. And you know, I wouldn't recommend harvesting young 2.5-year-old trees. It's tough on the trees, but we did it strictly for a marketing purpose.
Is there a picture of that over
Yeah.
there? Just click that thing down. There you go.
Okay, there's
There you go. Get an idea of it.
yeah, and this is kind of what they look like. You know, you're forming a hedge row, but because of the pushing them into production faster, you know, you do get a return on your investment a little bit faster in this system.
How is it pushing them into production
Well,
faster?
I don't know, but it's just they're staying compact. They're not, you know, you're not vegetative growth. Your vegetative growth is limited because you can't have them but so wide and so tall. I mean, our trees at any one time are never taller than probably, I mean, at maximum 12 feet tall.
So it's basically intensive pruning.
That's right, and I'll get to that too. It is very intensive pruning, and that's, you know, I'll get to that because that is one of the drawbacks, because there's your labor. You know, you have more human labor with that, but they're also figuring out, and like with this slide here, that they have more mechanized ways of pruning.
Yeah.
So that, you know, with the advent of the system, you know, new things keep coming about. You know, when they first started, it was all mechanic. I mean, it was all human pruning, all human. Well, they could top, but as far as pruning, it was all human. But they're trying to break away from that just a little bit. The basic on the super high density system, the basic needs fertility wise are the same as a traditional orchard. It's just your methods of getting the fertilizer to the plant are a little bit different. I don't think that the traditional orchards would spend the money to irrigate every tree. I mean, in a huge orchard, because it's, you know, your poly pipe, there's 15 to 20 feet there that's not receiving the water, you know, that doesn't need the water. So you would go around with these, you know, put emitters in at different places. But as far as the basic needs, you know, the N, P, and K are going to be pretty much the same. We've learned in our super high density orchard that definitely that too much nitrogen can be an Achilles heel. I mean, it can be a problem. I mean, we had to go in this year on our orchard and do some really, really heavy pruning. I mean, we probably wouldn't have made that step. We probably would not have taken that big step if it hadn't have been, we had a guy, Francisco, from Santiago, Chile, that was in helping us set up our mill. And he just, you know, when he looked at the trees, he was like, you know, he said, you're gonna lose some production. He said, but these really need to be cut back hard. And, you know, these were things, when we first started doing this, you know, all we wanted to do was get them to the first wire, you know, and, you know, by the end of the first year. And in hindsight, that is not, you know, that is definitely not the approach to take. They need to grow slow. I mean, I don't know if anybody grows cotton, but when we grow cotton, I mean, if you have a range plant that's growing vegetative, you don't set any fruit, and it's just, you know, you spend a whole year growing something that yields not what it should do. Whereas if you take your time and slow that plant down and let it set fruit as it goes, keep your internodes short, then you're gonna have more fruiting positions. Same principle for olive trees. I mean, it's without a doubt. We don't. As far as fertility though, on the nitrogen, I mean, the first year we ended up with approximately 90 units of actual N out, and we probably didn't need that much. The next year, 2 years, and we went out and we slung some chicken litter out because we had a lot of composted chicken litter laying around, and we slung that out, and we did not even put any cal nitrate out that year, and we had more than adequate vegetative growth. In fact, probably a little too much. Now, we were doing this on some pretty sandy dirt. I mean, we were variable rating chicken manure with turning the chain on and off as driving through. You know, we know where the sandy spots are from growing other crops there before. And but if you could take anything away from this on the fertility side, and Don could probably tell you this better than I can, just don't be too aggressive with the nitrogen. I mean, they grow. They really, really love our environment. I mean, this is an unusual environment for olive trees to grow in. They're used to a Mediterranean climate which is dry, you know, limited rainfall, and that's something that sometimes we have trouble limiting. You know, and I mean, I know I've seen many years when we don't get any rain. But since we started planting olives, we have gotten lots of rain. I mean, we're in good shape. But then phosphorus, the phosphorus requirements in the super high density are similar, you know, would be similar to traditional orchard. But all we have done, because we have adequate phosphorus in our soil, is we put out 10 gallons of 1034O at plant. As soon as we planted the trees, we put it out through the drip. We put out 5 gallons the first week and 5 gallons the second week. And 1034O is just what people would call a pop-up fertilizer.
Where is Lakeland, Georgia?
We're about 20 miles north of Valdosta. So if you know where Valdosta is, it's right off I-75.
You got limestone at some point?
Yeah, under the ground, but we do have to lime. We definitely do. I mean, that's definitely right. And that's actually my next talking point after the potash is but the potash, somewhere around 100 to 120 units of potash is what we're putting out. Now, we've used various ways. We put out potassium thiosulfate. We've used a slurry of murate, which both will go through the drip fine. You have no problems. We've had some homogenized fertilizer left over from when we were spreading cotton fertilizer, and we've utilized that. You know, what would be like a 3728 homogenized fertilizer, and we've gotten some potash from that. But one thing I do urge you to be aware of, especially when you start pulling any fruit off the trees, is the potash levels need to be maintained up above, above 1% is, I think is the range. But I mean, I would rather be way above than below, because the first year that we harvested the 2.5-year-old trees, we went into that winter and these trees were somewhat drained. And potash, I don't know if it's a clear cut, there's clear cut information that it's a deterrent to damage, winter damage, but we won't ever let our trees suffer for potash, or be a little low of potash, because we really feel like, and our friends in California that have helped consult us in this, say that they see it as well. Low potash levels mean damage in the following winter. So maintain it, and all this can be done, and we do tissue samples and we do soil sampling. I mean, all this, you can maintain these levels based off of soil samples. But and when you get into where you want to decide a place to plant and to pick your spot, you definitely want to pick a well-drained soil. I mean, we have our soil. I mean, we have a berm built up, and which helps get the roots a little bit more above the water table. But it's on what's called Tifton soil where we are, and that's kind of a rocky clay subsoil, but it's got a sandy top. But I mean, they do not want wet feet. That high season water table in the winter can be a problem if it's really waterlogged soil. But the main thing is controlling surface water. If you can get the surface water off and and it doesn't sit there and puddle, I mean, the soil should be adequate. I mean, they'll grow in any type of soil, from pure, almost beach sand from the photo earlier, from almost beach sand to hard rock. I mean, they'll grow in the side of a mountain that's just pure rock, as long as they have a little soil there to get established. pH range, they grow in pH soil from 5.5 to 8.5. I mean, there's a wide range of soil. We shoot for 6.5, because that's our target pH on our cotton and peanut and corn land. So that's where the soil, what I feel like is most important is that's where your soil, the elements are most readily available. And at 6.5 is just the target pH for everything being most readily available in our soil.
We took the pomegranate, we had a similar
Yeah.
last time, and they said the pomegranate trees really liked organic matter. Is it the opposite for olives?
No. I think they like organic matter, and I mean, this is a little bit different, but we're using a product called Keyplex, which is a humus-based product, which is based off organic matter, and then it can work through the soil and it can work through the tree, and we're spraying that out with our Nutrifite, and spraying it out with we just made our first boron application, and we're at cauliflower stage on our trees. I mean, we're pushing little buds now. We're probably 2 weeks away from bloom, and I don't know where are you on your trees as far as that thing. And so we're hitting them with boron and a product called Keyplex, which is based out of Florida. And we're using a Nutrifite with sulfone. We're doing that, which is a phytophthora deterrent, and it helps with root rot. But we've seen results where it's helped in peanuts and everything else. It just makes the plant stronger. So we're doing that, and then we're also putting out copper. Now we'll make a separate spray for our copper fungicide, because the Nutrifite and the copper, I mean, you can do it, but it kind of suggests not to, and we just don't need to take a chance on doing anything wrong. So we'll make one more application of boron, and then we'll put our copper spray in with that. And but the 6.5 pH is very, very, I mean, that's a very good range. I mean, that would be a great range for here, that without a doubt. When you, this is something we found out as we were, we flew in a guy, John Post from California, when we were deciding to do this, and he's kind of one of the olive gurus out, and done a lot of work with UC Davis, and picked him up at the airport in Jacksonville, and we're driving him back to where our meeting was going to be held, and said, John, I said, what do you think about this super high density thing in South Georgia? He said, well, Kevin, he said, I've been looking at all the data and looking at you guys relative to us he's in Yuba City in Sacramento Valley. And he said, I'm convinced it'll work here for sure. And I said, man, that's great. He said, but let me preface it with this. He said, I'm an eternal optimist. So I was like, okay. But he said, no, he said, the issue, and this all came about too, but they're establishing some orchards in Uruguay, which is a really similar climate to South Georgia, humidity, rainfall. They're doing that strictly because they're not even putting in any irrigation infrastructure. They're doing it. They're doing all their fertility is it's dry, and they're doing that. But he just he's really aided us a lot. And then for him to say that he felt as though it would work, that really helped us decide, yes, we're going to do that. We didn't have anybody that was doing the super high density, and then in that time we met Don, and Don is definitely our mentor, Uncle Don, excuse me. And but we didn't have we didn't really have anybody to turn to, and we didn't know what to do. So in talking to him, he made us feel he gave us confidence to pursue this little project, and he also Going back to the planning of the super high density, we had trees that were going to be there in a month. We were ready to do this deal, and when we flew him in, we went to a grove where we were going to plant. Well, they hadn't done any of the trellis infrastructure or anything. And he said, well, guys, he said, how are y'all planning on keeping these trees standing up? They had some bamboo stuck up out there, but without the wire, the 1 wire or 2 wire trellis, the bamboo seemed to fall over. But that tree in this system needs it needs stability to have a central leader to run up, and you want to maintain the apical dominance. When we first started doing this, you wanted to maintain the apical dominance up to about 6 feet, and then just let the tree spread out. Since then, because of going back to labor cost, because with the trying to maintain apical dominance, you have to make a human trip through the field every maybe 2 weeks or so, but it's every foot of growth of the tree you need to make another tie. And so if you every time you make a human trip through the field, it's a minimum of $80 an acre. So if you have a 6 foot tall tree and you make 6 ties, then you got strictly tying that tree up, and it doesn't cost any more for them to cut one limb off when they're going through, but you can figure out a minimum of $80 an acre per trip. So if you got 6 trips, then that's $500 an acre right there, just in tying up and in making one little small cut on the small trees. Like every time you tie up 1 foot, then you can cut off a lower limb. And so that led to and that's when we first put our trees in. We used the 2 wire system, and I can show you. I don't know if it's going to show you that, but anyway, but you see the end post there.
Push the button down, the down button that may have a close one.
Yeah, but you can't see them. You can see this. I know it's hard for y'all to see, but this is our end post, and then we have a wire about waist high going this way, and then we have a wire about I guess breast high on me, and these end posts, and then you have to have about every 50 feet you have a metal post, and then between the metal post you have bamboo at each tree. So this system cost us probably between somewhere due to the height of the post and the height of the metal post that you have to buy with the 2 wire system, cost about probably close to $500 or $600 more than the trellis system with a single wire. And I know it doesn't seem like it would add up that much, but it really does. If you reduce the length of this post down, to waist high, and then you reduce the length of the metal post, the metal T-post down, another 2 feet, then I mean, it adds up, and you're also taking out one of your wires. And what you're doing this wire, 1 and 2 wire system for, is simply to maintain a hedgerow, and that it's critical that you have this to be able to machine harvest. I mean, if you've got trees just going everywhere and leaning this, that, and the other, I mean, there's no way that you can mechanically harvest them. I mean, there is a machine called a Colossus, and it's about $1 million, I believe, and you can actually harvest, traditional orchards. I mean, but I don't see how you can make it. I mean, I don't know how we can make that happen. I can't hardly pay for a cotton picker on 1,000 acres, but.
What is your end post made of?
The end post is wood. Now, they use a well casing because it's just a dime a dozen out in California. But we use treated wood posts. I mean, we have a friend that's in the post business, so that is probably a reason we use those too.
And at some point, you don't need them anymore.
Yeah, but nobody takes them out, because if you get into a situation, just say for instance you have some crazy winter and it kills the trees back. I mean, just say it does happen. You can cut these trees off. As long as the root crown is not dead, then these trees will sucker right back out, and you can use the existing system to train them again. But there's just no way to take them out. If these end posts do rot and come out, and you take them out or something, it's not going to be a problem. I mean, we haven't seen any issues with any of the wire or anything trying to get into the harvester or get into the mill, which this is the first year we ran that big mill, but we didn't have any issues. Now, we do have magnets, at the cleaning part of the mill, going through the washer and stuff, that should catch anything, but we haven't experienced any problems. But
If you have extraordinary wind too, I mean, and you may have a big windstorm or a hurricane come up through, and if you've got something to hold the trees up, then,
and the reason it's different for the super high density system versus Don's system of the traditional orchard is his trees have to be strong because they don't have anything around them. If you got one tree, this tree's got the root down strong into there, and it's ready for the wind. 2 years ago, we were having a seminar with Alan Green, who was started California Olive Ranch, and Paul Mueller. There was other people there speaking. They were there, and right before they came, the Tuesday before the seminar, we had a tornado go through our orchard, and it was pretty tough. I mean, we were biting our nails pretty hard. It leaned one part of the orchard over. We had to stand every tree back up. Well, if we wouldn't have had the system, the trellis system holding them up, it would have uprooted every tree. And with this thing, we just went back in and, by hand and pushed them back over. There's no way they would have been able to handle that type of weather if they hadn't have had the trellis system. Now, mind you, the reason that they can't handle that is because they're right there together. We're using drip irrigation. I mean, all the nutrients, everything they need is right there at the, so the roots don't have to go way down deep to get to the, to get into water. And for that's why the trellis system is so important. But what we have learned since then, and this is following the lead of California Olive Ranch. I mean, Adam Engelhart is their farm manager, and Gayla knows Adam. I mean, he's probably as intelligent a person as I've ever met. I mean, plays the cowboy hat and, kind of a country boy thing, but I mean, he's a genius at looking at the bottom line and making things happen. I mean, when you ask them how much money they have in a gallon of oil at California Olive Ranch, he'll say, well, this year we had $7.22 in our olive oil. Not, I'd say, man, we had about $7.50 or $8. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, he knows to the penny because he's constantly trying to reduce the bottom line, and that was upon their lead is where the one wire system came from. And I mean, they're putting in 1,000-acre blocks like that now because of the cost reduction. Not only do you reduce your cost from the actual cost of the metal and the wood and the wire for the trellis, but you're also reducing your labor cost because you're getting the trees up to maybe 4 ties at the most. And so there, you know, that in itself, if it's $100 a trip, you can figure that's just $200 an acre you're saving just on tying up. And a lot of times on our trees, we only made 3 ties, so you're saving, you know, $250, $300 an acre just in labor costs by going to the one-wire system. Now, your trees, by doing this, your trees are a little more erratic. They're not as honed, but you can still maintain that hedgerow. You know, you just don't want limbs that are this big around moving out, you know, laterally into the road, because they'll get into the harvester and, you know, break bars and things like that. But you can still control their growth, and a lot of that goes back to the nitrogen. You know, don't go overboard on the nitrogen. Don't, you know, make them kind of. I almost feel like you want to make them kind of suffer for nitrogen almost. I mean, you know, deprive them a little bit. Now you can give them a little. What we've started doing is right now we'll give them a good shot to get some vegetative growth. Not enough to push them out of fruiting mode. I mean, you don't want to push them past, you know, out of fruiting mode into vegetative mode. But as soon as you know that the fruit is stuck and you've got fruit, then you give them a little shot of nitrogen to get that vegetative growth for the next year. Because all the olives grow on 1-year-old wood. So if you have a big crop and you don't get any vegetative growth in the year that you have the big crop, then of course the next year you're not going to have any fruit because you don't have the 1-year-old wood for it to grow on. So finding that balance is important. I can't tell you that we found the balance yet. I mean, I really can't. But now Adam Engelhardt at California Olive Ranch, they found the balance. John Post has found the balance. John Post at his house in Yuba City is averaged 3 years in a row 7.25 tons to the acre, 3 years in a row. Now he's a guru and he doesn't cut anything back. I mean, they're doing all the experiments. I mean, he's involved in everything. And but they are. I mean, that's big. I mean, that's huge. I mean, they're finding that balance. But the balance in California is definitely not going to be the balance in Lakeland, Georgia. And the balance even in Texas is not going to be the balance in Lakeland. And then you got the balance here might not even be the balance in Lakeland. But something we do have to watch in the super high density system in South Georgia or in the Panhandle, like we are here, is we've got to be a little proactive on fertility and not let these trees get too big. I mean, because it costs you in the long run to have to go back in and prune. It's very important that we realize that we might get 50 inches of rain a year, whereas in Yuba City they might get 10 a year, and so they can control their growth, and we don't have that option. I mean, the only way we can control our growth, besides having to prune and hedge, which loses 1-year-old wood, you know, and loses fruiting positions, is to slow that tree down, and because we can't just cut the water off, but we can cut the nitrogen levels back in our fertilizer. That's definitely a way to help.
Are there any PGRs for
that? We haven't noticed anything. You know, I keep saying I'm just going to put out some pics on it, you know, but John, he assured me that they had tried most everything, but I don't know. I've got cotton again right by one orchard this year. I think I'm just going to hang it out some urea and pigs over it to see what happens. It can't hurt it.
Bonsai a while back, and that was just at the pond, I think.
Yeah.
Sir?
Bonsai was at the pond.
Well, see, they tried it. They tried prep products on the because that was one of the first things I threw out was Ethapon, and they tried that, and they really haven't seen a reaction to it. But you know, their guidelines and their laws are a lot different than ours too, and there's some hurdles that we can jump over that they have to jump over them at night when nobody's looking. You know, they try. Anyway, it's but back to the fertigation. I mean, Don, you hand fertilize everything, and that's good in a traditional orchard. But when you get into the super high density orchard, there's no way it's cost effective to hand fertilize every tree. I mean, you're going from 100 trees to 600 trees an acre or 650, And it's just hard to do that. So that's where the fertigation comes in to play. And that's another, difference in the traditional trees and the super high density, is you really need to set up for fertigation. Now, mind you, we haven't used much, as I said, we haven't used much cal nitrate, which is our source of nitrogen for the olives. We haven't used much cal nitrate in the last couple of years, but we have put out a good bit of potash and through the drip. I mean, and keeping our potash levels up. We, and as I said, I think it was somewhere around 100 to 120 units of K that we want to make sure we put out throughout the summer. And we do some fall potash. I mean, just a little bit, not a lot, but we put some out just to maintain those levels where, as we move into the winter time, we have a healthy tree that's ready to withstand some crazy weather. We had what I would call this year, we had a true winter. I mean, we for 2 or 3 years we were 80 degrees, 85 degrees in January for like 15, 20 days in a row. Then we'd get 17 degrees in February. And this year, we moved towards getting cold like normal in the fall, around Thanksgiving. It was cooling off as we got towards Christmas, and then it got cold and it stayed cold. We didn't have 14 degree, 12 degree weather, but we had a lot of 20 degree weather. And honestly, our trees, even the ones that we had to butcher that had gotten too big and we had to go in and do really heavy pruning, I mean, they look fantastic right now. I mean, they really do. I mean, they're coming out of the winter ready to fruit, and they're not confused. They don't think it's, February. They don't think it's June. I mean, they think it's, the 1st of April, and they're pushing buds and they're about to start flowering.
And how old are those trees?
Well, these trees are starting their 5th growing season. See, these have been pruned. These trees have been pruned, topped 3 times. Every year we've topped them. I mean, they would be, honestly, they'd be 25 feet tall right now if we had, and they're on their 5th year. Now we have some, will be 4-year-old trees and 3-year-old trees as well. Our 3-year-old trees, our 4-year-old trees and our 3-year-old trees, the ones that we didn't let get too big, the ones that we knew, hey man, shut the fertilizer off, the nitrogen off. I mean, they look great right now. I mean, they really do. There's a potential for an enormous crop. But now, mind you, whether it's at Don's place or if it's at our place or if it's your place here, I mean, they can flower like it's nobody's business. And if you have 10 or 12 days of cloudy, rainy weather while they're pollinating, you can kiss it. I mean, it's gone. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, they do not like, and in cloudy weather is just as bad as rainy weather for trees. But now, typically, this time of the year, we're and where we are, and I think y'all got to see this too, we're pre-afternoon thunderstorms for the most part. We're still coming out of the winter. I mean, mainly the thunderstorms we get now, the front's moving through, and that takes a day, and it's gone. But, in the summertime, you get those afternoon thunderstorms, and you can get them every day. And typically, this time of the year, I mean, we're actually, believe it or not, I know this sounds crazy, but we're watering to plant corn right now because we're wetting the very top of the dirt. But, that means that we hadn't had rain in a few days. Now, we're expecting to get some more this weekend. But what I'm getting at is hopefully that period of inflorescence that we enter, which is going to be maybe 2 weeks from now to possibly the middle of May, something like that. I mean, and that range can change each year with the season, but typically we are pretty dry then. Big winds can affect them too. Now they actually go out and run air blast sprayers through to move the pollen around, but it's a fine line of moving it with an air blast sprayer and having 50-mile-an-hour gusts. Now the year we had the tornado, that was during flowering, and it affected, and it's weird that it affected the area that it blew over worse than it did across the highway, and even in the same field down because it drops off to down into a bottom, and the bottom where it didn't receive the wind because it, you know, it was the, you know, it just didn't get the same wind. You could tell it didn't affect it as bad. So they're whether it's the traditional orchard or super high density, they're during inflorescence and flower, they're really susceptible to wind and rain and whatnot.
When did you see fruit set? What do you start seeing?
Well,
actual
you
fruit set?
you'll see, I guess, Don might need to help me with this, but it, you know, it'll vary from you, but after you flower, you usually, they'll dry up and they'll kind of turn dark and fall off, and probably you'll know within a month after they flower if it's set or not, wouldn't you think?
You get about 5%, about 95% fails.
Yeah,
And if it didn't, the trees couldn't handle it.
that's right.
They know what to do.
Especially at Don's place. He's got some secret potion he's not telling you.
Kevin, do you want a chair?
I'm okay. I just don't need to put word in the computer. But
Had your trees been younger, would this harsher winter have been a problem?
yeah, I mean, you know, yes, I think so. I think once they get past about the 3-year-old stage, I think they're immune to really. I mean, their mortality is pretty much out of the picture. I think. I
So
mean,
you just
from
kind
the
of
cold
get,
weather.
you kind of get lucky. If you set out hundreds of trees
Yeah.
and you get a bad trees that first or second year, you may be in trouble.
But no, no, I don't think so. If you get your trees established early in the year, where they can, you know, if you put them in, but say by the middle of May. I mean, when we tried to stay away from this, but we were putting in trees for other people, and we put some in August the 20th, the 3-year-old, and they look unbelievable. And we had a weird winter, but we were able to get through with no mortality. You know.
Kevin, I'd like Mike to comment on that. He's got the orchard right across the street. We got to 14 degrees here.
Wow.
Did you lose any, Mike?
I think I did, yes.
Yeah, well, that magic number, 14 is the magic number. I mean, they say that's where it is. Now, the first year, we got down to 15, and that first year we had 22 acres planted, and we didn't lose any of our trees to mortality. I mean to cold weather.
It seemed like the Kornicki did worse than the other.
That
seemingly.
Kornicki is the least cold hardy of the three, without a doubt. The Arbequina supposedly the most cold hardy, then Arbison, then Kornicki. But you know what? We had a group from Greece that came through, and Kornicki's a Greek variety, and they looked at our Kornicki and they said that our Kornicki looked better than any Kornicki in Greece. And actually, our Kornicki, and I don't know if it's because they produce later, they flower a little bit later. They really, you know, tree for tree have outproduced our Arbequina. But now they're older and established too. We did lose, you know, a few Kornicki and Arbison that first year, but we didn't lose many. I mean, it was statistically negligible. I mean, it wasn't, you know, we lost more simply from, you know, they say 3 to 5% loss just, you know, when you plant before they get bust out of that root ball and get established. And we lost more during that time than we did through the winter. But you think, how many, you have an idea of percentage you think you lost?
25, I think.
Yeah, and the majority of that was Kornicki?
I believe so.
So are you trying, I know on blueberry plantations, you can, depending on the variety, you can have them producing from, you know, a month or two, and different varieties coming on in a row. Are you trying to do the same thing with
Well,
ours?
what we've done in our orchard is upon establishment, we've gone in and we've planted about 94% of the trees in Arbequina, and we would space out sporadically, you know, I mean, and we just drop in the Kornicki and the Arbisana as pollinators. Well, since that time, and which made total sense, but we didn't think about this because we were once again going off California's guidelines. We just assumed 5% pollinators was adequate. Well, that's adequate in California where there are 150-year-old mission olive trees everywhere, you know, and they've got pollen in the air. We don't have any. Since then, we've recommended that people do, you know, somewhere around 10% pollinators. I would definitely look at doing a minimum of 10% pollinators. Have you spoken with Sam on that? Have y'all as with my cousin Sam on what y'all are putting out? Have y'all talked about that? I mean, as far as
Yes,
the percentage of the Arbakina versus the Kornicki and.
We're gonna do a 70, like 30%.
That's good. I mean, I think that's fantastic. I really do, because, I mean, I think that 10% would be the minimum these days. I mean, because we're in Georgia where there is no, or in Florida where there is no olive pollen floating around the air like it is in California. So,
Not yet.
that's right. That's right. Well, you know, but I mean, those are the kind of things that you just don't realize until you're sitting there and you're trying to make a hypothesis of why these trees didn't fruit as well as they should or something. Yes, sir.
When you do this mixture, you're doing a once-over harvest, mechanical harvest?
That's right. That's right.
So potentially the pollinators, the trees aren't really something
That-
you're looking at.
yeah,
You're
but-
basing your harvest on your majority.
That's right, but when we first started doing this, the guidelines for true, what you would say is pure Arbakina, I know this sounds crazy, but it has to be 85% Arbakina. Doesn't have to be 100% Arbakina in the big scheme of things. We didn't know this, but so that's why when we did the 95%, we knew we were in the range of saying this is pure Arbakina oil. And, but what we've since doing now to eliminate that problem, because we do have a harvester. We didn't have a harvester when we started, so we interplanted them. Every 25 plants or every 20 plants, we put a Kornicki, then we put a Arbasana, did it that way. Now we're doing straight rows of Kornicki, straight rows of Arbasana, so we can harvest and we can have pure Kornicki, pure Arbasana. Kornicki is by far the highest demand oil. I mean, that if you realize that you could produce the Kornicki here, I mean, there's bulk Kornicki selling. I mean, bulk oil selling for $60 a gallon in bulk Kornicki. I mean, they have trouble producing it even down south, and you know, I guess with the south, I would think south, because it's south of San Francisco and stuff. But the Paso Robles area is a pretty good climate for growing olives. It's warm and it's hot. They have trouble growing Kornicki there as well. Do you have? No.
So when you're mechanically harvesting and you've got these rows of different varieties, they potentially could be harvested at different times?
No, that's right, without a doubt. But now, we didn't have the harvester. The first year we harvested, we used 3 different blueberry machine harvesters, and you know, as a trial, we used a BEI and then a towel. There was 2 types of BEI. We used a sway bar and a finger, and then the BEI with a finger. The BEI people were supposedly trying to develop a true olive harvester as well, kind of like Corvan did. You know, Corvan has a blueberry harvester, and then the Oxbow is the Corvan as well, and it's a true olive harvester, and that's what we have. Now, we can harvest blueberries with our olive harvester, but you can't harvest olives with a blueberry. It's just the fatigue is it's not stout enough. I mean, we were replacing bearings. I mean, it was crazy, breaking metal, because it's just not designed to run at those RPMs. I mean, we were running the machine that needed to be ran at 1,500 RPMs. We were running that machine at 2,200 RPMs, and you can imagine. I mean, we'd make a round and we'd have a main bearing go out. You know, it was kind of a nightmare. But now we had good luck with the harvester this year with the Oxbow that we purchased.
So if it's possible, if you're growing these 3 different varieties and maybe in the future more than that, you know, you have one variety that doesn't make for whatever reason, that wind comes through at just the right time or whatever, are you foreseeing you could have your backup?
That's exactly right.
University.
And that's a very good point, because that's what we learned also from Francisco, our Chilean friend. He says what they do in Chile is they plant, there's a variety, and we're planting this variety, and I can't remember the name. Sam has ordered some of the trees, and we're putting them around our mill for ornamental stuff. But we're also going to put some through the orchard, like in the center, and it's a hand harvested olive. It's a table olive, but it's pollination time, and I need to find out what this variety is. No, I wish I could tell you, but I can find out. It lasts like 2 months. It lasts from before the Arbakina began to pollinate, or began to flower, to after the Kornicki flowers. So they're planting full rows of them in there, and then they're just, you know, they're hand harvesting them. I mean, they're table olives, and but there are also a lot of, back to that, there are a lot of table olives that they're developing systems to mechanize, you know, to mechanically harvest those as well, and which will open up a lot of options for other varieties too. I mean, you know, the truth of the matter is, no matter what it is, whether it's a tomato or it's an olive or it's corn to make grits, or I mean, what people want, the push these days, and it's going to continue to be this way, is they want to know where their food's coming from. And if, man, this stuff's grown, you know, 2 hours down the road. I mean, you know, that's a lot different than it being grown in, you know, in Italy, or even being grown. I mean, it costs less to get a product shipped from Italy than it does to get a product shipped from California. As crazy as that may sound, but I mean, once you cross the Mississippi River, it's just like carbon credit nightmare. And these are all things that we were researching as we were getting into the olive deal, about our proximity to Miami and to New York, and you know, and the fact that we would be the first, you know, the first production in the Americas. We would be the first to come into production. I mean, we're a month and a half ahead of California.
What about the potential for organic growing?
There is, because you know our main problem, and there's a huge potential for it, more so than cotton and peanuts, because you have organic copper. You know, there's organic options for copper, and that's the only fungicide that we use is copper. I mean, well, we put the Nutrified out, and it isn't, you know, but we're not organic. But we do the Nutrified because we've seen it push our yields in peanuts and other things up, and so we're doing it on our olives as well. I mean, it's nothing. Actually, the person that I buy the product from, they're the largest organic citrus producer in Florida. It's Uncle Matt's Organics, and it's Ben McLean. And but they don't use it on their olive. I mean, or their citrus on their organic citrus, because it doesn't have an organic label. But copper does. So I mean, that's, you know, and there are plenty of organic options for fertilizer. You know, and there are not a lot of pests that attack the olive trees. I mean, peacock spot's your main problem, and that can be kept at bay with copper. You know, we spray about 4 copper sprays a year, and that's probably our maximum. But in California, they might not spray but twice is about their maximum. You know, once in the spring, and then after post-harvest, they spray again. And if they have a really, really crazy winter, they might spray. But ours could be as high as, you know, we've sprayed as many as 6 times with copper.
Is that because of the higher rain levels?
That's right. Higher rain levels. I mean, just, you know, humidity. You know, Don's trees, traditional, they get a good wind. He's on a good hill. He gets good wind flow. And we get good wind. Don't get me wrong. We get lots of wind. Yeah, that's right.
So if you're a small operation, it might behoove you to try to find a well-ventilated spot.
Yeah, definitely. And Don, I think, says that in the wintertime, a south-facing hill is probably going to be good. Wouldn't you think? I mean, as far as heat and stuff like that. You know, and things like that. You know, I mean, because I know that our trees are, we run them north and south. That's kind of the way they want you to do them, run them north and south. But our east and west trees last year had more fruit on them than our north and south. And our north and south trees, it's a hillier. And it's not, I mean, not mountains. I mean, it's just a little hill. But so the northern hill doesn't get the sunlight that they do on the southernmost hill. And the production was affected because of that, I believe. I mean, because it didn't, you know, it was colder, and it wasn't drying the tree out as well, you know.
Would you select varieties for those different spots?
Probably so. You probably could do that. But in this Arbequina, I mean, in this super high density system, the bottom line is your major varieties are going to be Arbequina, Arbesana, and Courtney. Now, there's some other varieties coming out right now that are supposed to work really well in the super high density system. But if you were planting tomorrow, you know, there's no, it's you know, 70% Arbequina, 15% Courtney, 15% Arbesana, or whatever. You know, that, I mean, you could do 80-20. I mean, I don't think I would go under 80-20 though. I mean, but the 90-10 was where Adam Englehart and Paul Mueller and some other people that were, touring our orchards and looking at fruit sets and stuff like that. They say, I'm saying, we're saying a minimum of 10% of pollinators. But that's your option. It's Arbequina, Kornicki, and Arbusana, or the varieties, with Arbequina making up the majority of that.
What about longevity of trees? Are you sacrificing longevity by doing high density?
Right. Well, the oldest trees in this system, about 22 years old, and they're still at full production. I mean, they're rocking it. I mean, but they're keeping the trees small. They're babying them, and they're keeping them sprayed with copper, and it's just the oldest olive tree that I've heard of. Paul Miller told me he picked an olive off of a 3,000-year-old olive tree, and I have a medallion from some Croatian people that they gave this medallion to my son when he was happened to be out of school that day, and they were touring our farm, and it was a 1,500-year-old cross section, a cross section of a 1,500-year-old tree that they get all of the cuttings for their village from. And it's still there. It's the mother plant, and so I think as long as we can keep disease at bay, which is mainly peacock spot. We don't have any olive knot yet, but I mean, things can happen. But
How about stink bugs?
well, we've seen that at Don's place, and
We have stink bugs further south in Florida.
we've seen that at Don's, and that's why we went down and hand harvested some with Don, because it was going to have to be oil, and it couldn't be table olive.
Yeah.
They wouldn't make it grade.
Because they were damaging the fruit?
Yeah, and that would be a deterrent. Now, that's going to be a problem on your organic deal, because I don't know. I mean, a brick is the only thing you can kill them with. I mean, you can't. I don't know that there's an organic option for stink bugs.
For the prospective grower,
Yes.
what about processing commitments, production contracts, when for harvesting these things?
That's right, and that's the things that as you move forward and decide if you want to do this. I mean, we're definitely in the. This is the definitely pushing it as far as with our mill. We did, and I'll scroll down. And it harvester over. Sorry, I'm not much on the PowerPoint thing. I apologize. But this is the harvester here, the Oxbow. This is actually our harvester here on the bottom right. And then this is an older style harvester, which is a grape harvester that's been modified to harvest the olives. But this Oxbow is, and y'all might be familiar with Oxbow. They make pick saws, they pick sweet corn, and I mean they're heavy in the market in several rounds. But the mill that this is actually a diagram of our mill that we put in. Minus we don't have the second century. We only have one centrifuge. But it's within six hours is a common trucking distance for a mill. I mean they do that all over. They do it in California. They do it in they do it in Spain and in Italy. I mean that's not that uncommon. That being said, we're probably 5.5 hours from here, and but we do have a mill. Our mill is set up. We hope to service the west. We hope to service up into the low country in South Carolina. There's areas there that could grow, and then definitely, I mean, I think a huge area is for us. I mean, we feel like this, and this is kind of like a rudimentary design, but the lower cotton belt. I mean, if you go up to about middle Georgia, maybe not all the way up to Macon, but maybe, and this is definitely going to be south of Birmingham and stuff like that, but just come across about the same distance away from the Gulf all the way up. I don't know if that distance is 150 miles or what it might be, 120 miles, but and then down into the peninsula of Florida, on down in. I think the Lakeland area is going to be pushing it as far as the chill hours, as far as to get on the fruit every year. But that when we set our mill up and put our mill in, we knew that we could service a big portion of that area from Lakeland, Georgia, because we're.
If you work them at night when it's cool.
That'll help. You can.
Go even further.
Yeah, that's right. And refrigerated trucks. I mean, see, we the first year we had the big harvest, and what we'd had a harvest big enough to need a bigger mill. We took them to Texas, and we force cooled the olives to 42 degrees. We have a friend that has a blackberry building, and they force cool all there. So we force cooled the olives and put them on a truck and hauled them to California. To Texas. And they made the extra virgin grade no problem. I mean, there was no issues. You know, one thing they did, and this is how high tech the chemical analysis is these days, is they detected a problem with the malaxer. In the malaxing stage, like there was one little spike that showed that it was still within the range of extra virgin, but they had a belt break and on the malaxer, and they picked it up at a chemical lab in Australia. I mean, they picked us up with the sample. I mean, and it did. I mean, if Scott was there, and the guy whose meal we were using, he said, well, we got to call the Alpha Laval people in California. He was like, man, we can't call them. We got to tear this thing apart and fix it. I mean, this stuff will be gone before we can have it, you know, before they get here.
The melaxation process, you might want to explain.
Yeah, well,
I'll cover that.
Oh, will you? Okay.
yeah, he makes some good oil.
Kevin, what's it cost to process a ton of olives through your plant?
Well, all this stuff is new for us because we have to decide where we're at a point to where we want to process people's fruit. So we might have to offer it cheaper than, you know, say $400 a ton is common in California, $450 a ton. Now that's based off a ton. It's not based off of gallons, because if someone brings in a ton of olives that are 20% water, and somebody brings in a ton, not 20%, but 80% water, and somebody brings in a ton that's 60% water,
Right.
then, you know, you're still milling a ton of olives. You're still running a ton of olives through the product. Now the end result and the turnout on the oil might be different, but it's somewhere around $400 a ton. But now we're hoping, and we're sitting down. We try to meet about once a month, and we're talking about all of this as we speak, as far as what we can do, because, you know, out there, I mean, somebody can bring them, you know, the first year might be able to bring 200 tons of olives, you know, to them, and then we might have a grower here that might only have 50 tons of olives or 40, and what we're trying to do is find a balance of where we can still afford to do it, but you know, offer it as, you know, an incentive for people to want to let us mill their fruit, because we need to mill. Well, I mean, we need to run as much fruit as we can through the mill. But, you know, which means what I'm getting at with that is we would probably are going to be able to offer milling costs lower than they would in California or Texas.
You want to grow the industry.
Yeah, we want to grow the industry. We would like the fruit. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people we know that want to bottle their own oil and this, that, and the other, and that we understand. But when we started doing this, we started the whole bottling and everything as we started growing. I mean, we were meeting with people on the marketing side, and it's a pretty big, it's a pretty daunting task to line all of that up. Luckily, our partner Jason enjoys the selling and enjoys the olive oil, so that works out good for us, because I enjoy the dirt and the milling and things like that. But
you also do custom installation too.
yes, we do, and we're doing Beth here, and we just met, and we're doing her, and they're coming next week, right? Are they coming?
I'm not exactly sure, I hope so.
I think Scott said, I guess this is where he was going. He said they had to leave again next week.
What's the ideal size to start out with in an acre?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to do less than, I probably wouldn't want to do less than 10 acres, just because we did it to start with, and we know, I mean, the economics of scale in California, they put it at 100 acres for a small grower. But in Georgia, I mean, we're still only have a little over 50 acres personally, but there's some other people, we do work for other people, so we're actually I mean, we're spreading our equipment out over a pretty big acreage. I mean, really over probably close to 250 or 300 acres now, because we're maintaining orchards, spraying other people's orchards for them and stuff.
But there's kind of a difference between like production and maybe like what you call boutique. Like what you've got is more of a boutique orchard where you're having people come pick it. Part of it is the atmosphere, part of it is, and so you get away with smaller acres for that.
Oh, without a doubt, man. There's no question. I mean, and that's the whole deal why we are able, the only reason we can stay in business right now is because we're the first people, really have, with, Georgia Olive Farms, olive oil is really the first oil out there that's produced in the southeast on a pretty good size scale.
Except for Don Mueller.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. I mean, his is, but like it goes back to the boutique deal. I mean, his is, I mean, it's just, you're going to be amazed when you see how he makes it all happen. It blows my mind. He's a master. I mean, and his help to us has been invaluable. I mean, yeah, I joke about it, but I always tell people, I said, Mr. Mueller, and he said, now let me tell you something quick, son. He said, Mr. Mueller's dead. And I think Don's gonna live to be 180.
No question about it.
I mean, it blows my mind. But what he's done with his deal, and he's built awareness. He's won numerous awards with his oil, and you're gonna be amazed. We're pushing that to trying to go to a different level. Don is not interested in doing what we're doing. Don is happy with people coming out and hand harvesting, meeting fine folks. Now, we meet a lot of people out there. We have a lot of people that come through. Agritourism's going to be huge with this olive oil, just like it is with other things. But Don's deal is Don is old school, and it's just, you're going to be blown away when you see how he makes it all happen. And I tell you what, there's nothing better than ending a long day of harvesting olives with tasting some of his good oil and drinking some good red wine. Pretty good environment at Green Gate Farms.
I just would like to touch on that you are interested in seeing the production in general going up. Can you explain to me why you are? I understand there's huge demand, 98% of the United States. But what is it beneficial to you to have lots of growers and big fields and?
It builds an industry as a whole. We need more production, and it would be nice to run more olives through our mill, without a doubt. We need that to probably pay for the mill. But it also, if you're only producing, 1,000 gallons of olive oil, you're not going to have much say-so in the American Olive Oil Producers Association. If we want to impact American olive oil production, we're gonna have to up our production in the southeast to be a viable, play a viable role in that. In Texas the same way. Texas has fought some issues, man. A lot of their infrastructure was up around Chorizo Springs. Well, of course, it's been 115 degrees every day there in the summer, and there's been a huge drought. They're pretty much uprooting and moving all their production down north of Corpus, into the Victorian area, which is all Victorian clay, I guess I'd probably call it that. But anyway, they're hit a stumbling block, and they were moving up with their production, but that's who we bought the harvester from. We bought their oxbow because 3 years in a row they didn't have a crop worth harvesting because they couldn't irrigate enough. But down in the Victorian area, they're getting the Gulf breeze. It's not as hot, and they're also getting some hit and miss rain from there. And they're getting none of that in Chorizo Springs, and they don't get that till a hurricane comes through. That's the only time. But that being said, we'll be considered. It's going to be. For us to make an impact on the olive oil production in America, for us to be a viable player, it'll take Florida and Georgia, lower Alabama, lower Mississippi, maybe the low country in South Carolina. It'll take all of us teaming together to be, and this is, we've talked about this a lot, it'd be the southeast, olive oil producers. that's the only way we'll be able to make our mark and have a say in what truly happens as far as implementing standards and things like that. Because, I mean, if you only have one vote out of 100 and they want to bump you out of it, I mean, they can look at your, you know, they can look at the history of oil production of how it is, and then they can find one little thing in there that they can kick it out if it hits if the chemical analysis is off a little bit here, or if the sensory analysis, you know, if it doesn't pass the sensory analysis or the chemical analysis, it won't be true extra virgin olive oil. But you gotta have, we gotta bond together to create, you know, a big enough group to have any type of say-so in that issue. I mean, we're putting all, you know, we're putting olive trees in for other people. I mean, you know, and we're, you know, that's helping us stay in the game by doing it for other people. We put this mill in. This mill, I mean, you know, you can't get people to plant olives and produce olive oil if there's not a place that they can carry their oil. And I'm not saying that there might not end up being, I mean, you know, you might team up together here, this group, and put a mill in for this area, you know. I mean, it could be until you get a lot of production on hand, though. It's you know, it would probably we would probably suffice in Lakeland to be able to handle your oil. It goes back to his question of the timing. They're on strict schedules of harvesting and milling in California. Mill breaks down, the harvester shuts down. You know, now the mill won't shut down if the harvester shuts down because, you know, it'll just get ahead. But the harvester must shut down if the mill shuts down, and that's why there has to be a schedule. Now, in a schedule in South Georgia and Florida is harder to maintain due to rainfall and other things that get in the way. I mean, in California, you can call someone and say, hey, so when are y'all harvesting olives at your place? Oh, they'll be here at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon 3 months from now. And at 3 o'clock Saturday afternoon 3 months from then, they'll be there. I mean, it's just because they don't have rainfall. They don't have to stop harvest. I mean, they run 24 hours, you know, the mill runs 24 hours. And see, we will do that. We didn't have to do that with ours this year, but I think I think within the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be a need to run 24 hours for a while, because if we can set the crop that's coming out on our younger trees this year, we're poised for a big crop just on our acreage, and then, you know, there are other trees that around that we'll harvest for other people.
I know varieties are different timing, but when is your big season on running the mill?
Maybe the
October?
middle of September to the middle of October probably would be.
Did I hear anything similar to production contracts that you were talking about a while ago, working with people?
Well, I mean, what we are, you know, this is just kind of what we have talked about offering, and I'm probably not the best person to talk to you about this because I'm the janitor.
We went through the catfish business already down here.
Yeah. Well, I understand that. I mean, I've invested in amphitheaters and all kinds of stuff that never went up, so I understand what you're talking about. But you know, all we can do is offer the fact that, you know, say you do produce olives and you get into production. Say if you know, it would be simply something like we'd offer $25 a gallon for the bulk oil. I mean, which would be, you know, $8 a gallon higher than they would offer in California. It all goes back to getting the production up to where it needs to be to make it happen. You know, I mean, or also doing what we've done. I mean, we've spent the last 5 years of our life pretty neglecting our families and all this to try to build this industry, and it hadn't been easy, but you know, we're not out of the woods yet. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, we're still learning every day about what it takes to make it happen, and we're seeing what it takes to make it happen. But the best I could tell you as far as a grower contract is, if we put trees in for somebody, we want to mill their olives, and we want to buy their oil, because we need the oil to sell if we sell it, and we'd sell it under the Georgia Olive Farms label, you know, so, I mean, we want it, and so we need to make it appealing enough to the grower to, you know, to warrant growing and then letting us mill the fruit and then us buy the oil from you by the gallon.
Just real quick, is this a cold process, a cold press process?
It is, I mean, the malaxers, you can go up to 20, it's 83 to 85 degrees is Fahrenheit, so it's 27 degrees maybe Celsius, something like that. But yes, it's cold press, and you know, it's not even a press. It's a you go through the washer, and then you go into a hammer mill, is where it's pulverized, and the paste pumps take it into the malaxer. Spends 45 minutes to an hour in there, and then you pump it over to the horizontal decanter, and that's your major separation. You end up with all your solids going out through the floor, and we spread those back on the orchard. It's real high in potash. And then it goes from the decanter into the vertical centrifuge, and that's it spins about 6,000 RPMs, and it further clarifies the oil. And then we just go into storage. You know, we go into like a one-day tank where we'll bleed the sediment and water off one day, and then we'll go into some more tanks and rack it from there. And, I mean, you know, you don't, just because you get 100 gallons of oil off something, you don't end up with 100 gallons of oil, extra virgin olive oil. I mean, it just, because you got a certain amount that's going to be, you know, down at the bottom and can be contaminated with sediment. I mean, the faster you can use it, the better off on the stuff that's in the bottom, because it might not contaminate. But the stuff that's racked out good, the shelf life is, I mean, you know, 2 years, I mean, easy. I mean, good shelf life.
And just the price fluctuation from year to year that you've seen in 5 years, I'm sure you've tracked that for many years. Is it fairly stable? Is it climbing?
Well, you know, it dropped really. I mean, the world, you know, economic problems affect the price of olive oil just like they do building, you know, materials and stuff. So, but something that, and you know, Michael would know this from following everything, but you know, the EU has reduced the subsidies by 50% now on.
Well, we leaned on them, and they all of a sudden saw the light.
Yeah.
They reduced subsidies. What's happened in the EU of late, and Jason, the Georgia fellows, and the California people, we all went and marched on Washington about a year ago, and we got the International Trade Commission to do an investigation to go over to Europe and to verify what was going on. They had 40% production subsidies, 40%. And then they were shipping olive oil over here, calling it extra virgin olive oil, and it was mixed with soy oil and everything else.
Oh,
So as a consequence, they're making huge profits on this stuff. And so we went up, and what we were trying to do is trying to get the Congress to basically pass some legislation so we could inspect the olive oil when it came in the country. And if it was extra virgin olive oil and met the criteria, then fine, you know. But if it didn't, then, well, the bottlers, I'm not gonna name the names, but there's bottlers and there's people here in the United States that fought us in Congress, basically outspent us in Congress, and were able to delete the language. We had the language in the bill that came out of committee, and they struck the language on the floor. It's a long story, it's politics. But I guess the short answer is, there's some real problems that happened in Europe. What happened is that, and I probably sound like an old crank here, but they're very socialized there. It's a socialism sort of approach. And they were subsidizing the farmers because they want to do that, and it's a good thing. And they were subsidizing heavily, but they weren't subsidizing their marketing and storage. So what was happening is they were getting huge production, but they didn't have sufficient storage, and they were storing it improperly outside. It got hot. They didn't care. They'd take that oil that wasn't any good, and then they'd sell it to us.
They knew they had a market for it.
They knew they had a market. So now, you know, we got on the warpath with them, and we're beginning to put pressure on them through world trade and so forth, and to bring that down. So I guess the long story to answer your question is, their production has been kind of hurt. The average farm in Spain is like 5 hectares. I mean, what the olive producers there are, they're cooperatives, right? and they don't really get money. I mean, these big cooperatives have to, you know, they order up the fruit. They sell 30% of their production, Spain does, 30% of their production to Italy. And then Italy puts it, you know, does what they do and then ship it up, right? So what's happening now is that they have overproduction, but they don't have the storage. So as a consequence, the price of oil is going down because they have to push it out the door. The thing is that once, and we're gonna get it, we're gonna keep up with pressure up there. At some point, we're gonna have that inspection process, and when we have that inspection process, all of a sudden, our oil, that's no kidding, first class extra virgin olive oil, we're gonna be able to market it and sell it and not have the competitive pressures that we have from the adulterated oil from Europe.
It's 70% of the oil on the store shelf is mislabeled as extra virgin. It's a 20 billion euro a year difference in if they play by the rules. So you're talking about, I mean,
So what's a good brand?
Georgia Olive Farm. Core makes great oil, man.
I think you had a question. This lady had one.
Yeah, I'm interested in how many square feet you need for your processing line if somebody will,
Yeah,
or investor.
Our building is the whole building is only 6,500 square feet. But you need.
You have room for two.
That's right. We have room for another line, and we got what the front room is be like a tank farm where you store everything. So you probably a 20. I mean, you could probably just for the line itself a 20 by 75, 25 by 75 building would probably be adequate.
But you need three-phase power.
That's 3 phase.
You need three-phase power.
And that includes your refrigerations when you.
Well, you don't. We don't. All we have is cold. We don't have just air. We don't have a refrigeration. We don't need, because it's, you know, it's once we mill it and store it in that room, and we can keep it 65 degrees in there if we want to, but we keep it around 70 degrees, 68 to 70.
So when you buy this equipment, how much estimated, how much will it cost?
That mill,
For the whole thing, yes.
$500,000.
$500,000.
That's what, I mean, 468,000 just for the mill is what we pay Alpha Laval.
And you
And
said
that's
the
a
low.
2 ton an hour.
2 ton an hour,
And-
and it's all fully automated, state of the art. I mean, Victor that works with me on the farm, Victor can handle all of bringing it in, and I can run the axle and relaxing through the centrifuge. And when 2 people can do it, it takes about 8 people, they say, when it's not automated.
And the local and other people can bring their
That's
olives
right.
and you can do the
That's
charges
right.
on
That's right.
$45 per gallon, you said?
Well, you know, that's what we would, I mean, I'm just saying that would be a figure that we might pay
Okay.
somebody for their oil. The
400
milling is about
okay.
425 a ton. But now we would probably do less than that just to build the you know what I'm saying? I mean, we're still working on a lot of that.
Yeah, this lady had a question, and we're gonna have to go.
Oh, it's another question I'm just gonna put out to people, an excellent book on everything you just talked about, on the industry in Europe and the politics is, all of this by Mort Rosenblum. That's an excellent, very.
There's
very
another
good
book
reading.
out called Extra Virginity by Tom Mueller.
Yeah, he's great, man. He is.
Yeah.
He's
And you can go to the website, www.floridoliveCouncil.org, and we have a couple of links. There's also a good article in the New Yorker magazine about it. We're gonna have to move to.
Fantastic
Well, I mean,
information.
I'm not the best speaker in the world. I
I
try
think
to
you're
answer
great.
the question.
Let's give him a big hand.
Don Mueller come up here, and you probably already got kind of halfway introduced to him, and he's been answering a lot of questions already. So, as I said, Don is a pioneer. He's the godfather. I call him the godfather of Florida olives. He's been growing for quite a number of years, and out of Jackson County near Mariana. He's got a beautiful grove up there. You can see some of the pictures of his grove. And Don is a traditional olive grower whereas earlier you saw a super high density grove, Don has what you call a conventional grove. And we believe that there's room for both types in the state of Florida. And I think as we go forward, we're going to see smaller groves as well, putting out organic olive oil and doing the kinds of things that small growers can only do. So without further ado, I want to introduce Don Mueller, the godfather of Florida olives. And did you want to have a
Yes, just a moment. I wanted to introduce, as Michael said, we're going to put in a variety test here with 12 different varieties this year, and many more next year. And my co-PI in this, principal investigator in this, is Dr. Mac Thetford, and I want y'all to get to know him as well. So anyway, we're looking forward to doing the work on olives.
Mac, you here? Stand up. Yeah. Stand up. He's the olive man, so when you have an olive question, you come on and talk to him.
Hey,
All right.
one
Without
thing.
further ado then, I'd like to introduce Don Mueller.
Okay, let's get started on traditional olive growing. We can ask questions as I go through it. I'm beginning to get a little hard of hearing, so don't whisper your question. And with that, we can start with several frequently asked questions. And after we go through that, we will go through a series of slides where we can amplify any of the issues that come up on frequently asked questions. The Grove was started as an experimental farm back in 1999, and it was based upon information and training that I had inadvertently received when my family and I lived in Europe. We found Italy as a very good vacation spot, particularly a small hotel in the hills above Sorrento. And this hotel, 300-year-old abbey, was converted into a small hotel, and it came with 50 acres of olive trees around it, a Franciscan religious building. The proprietor found out that my wife and I both liked olives to the extent that she began to talk with us about her olive grove. And year after year, we would go back there, and each year we would learn a little bit more about olives. Okay, I retired, we moved to Florida, and after fishing and boating and all the things that you usually do here, I realized that an opportunity presented itself to start an olive grove here in Florida. And initially I looked at land down near the coast, but realizing that growing olives is a thing where you need cold weather to set the buds, but it can't get too cold. They can take heat up to 105, 110 degrees without hurting them. So I began looking further north from the shoreline. We live in Panama City, and found some ideal property in Jackson County. It's about 12 miles southwest of Marianna. The first olive trees that I planted seemed so happy that I decided we would add more. Really, I guess what I'm going to tell you about is a hobby that has gone terribly wrong. It now occupies my full time, particularly during harvest season. At the present time, there are about 400 trees in the grove, and they vary anywhere in age from 1 year to 15 years. I have gone through some varieties that couldn't make it. The the cold snaps we do have were bad enough to cause trunk splitting and that sort of thing, limb splitting, and so I discarded those varieties and just kept on with the more cold resistant ones, which primarily are the ones with longer vernalization seasons, dormant seasons, and they don't begin to wake up so early in the spring that they get caught by a cold snap. They stay dormant until the weather gets fairly warm. And surprisingly, there are several varieties that fit that frame of reference. And as you will find, rather than producing olive oil like Kevin and his brothers do, I'm more into table olives. As a matter of fact, this past season, I've had U-pick seasons for the past 8 or 9 years, but word of mouth or whatever has gone around to where last year the people picked all the large Osculana, Sevellino, Baronis, and they still kept showing up, so I let them start picking Mission, which are more of a medium-sized olive. And but they're the ones that when they get ripe, they make good oil, along with Arbequina. And at the end of the season, I didn't have enough olives to make oil. You've got to let them ripen first, and by the time they were starting to ripen, they were nearly all gone. So I didn't make any oil last year. The varieties that are presently growing in the grove are Osculana, Lechino, Frantoio, Arbequina. I do have one column, about 30 Arbequina trees, and they're, as Kevin indicated, they look a lot different than his do because these are 20 feet apart and they are quite big and bushy. They look like a little bit like willow trees. Also have Kalamata. Well, Kalamata is on probation right now. I'm not sure it's going to work. Manzanilla, I've been through Manzanilla and I have to discard it. It just can't handle the cold snaps. And Merino. Merino is a innocuous kind of olive, but it's a darn good pollinizer. And I've planted Merino in the southwest corner of the grove because the wind, I thought, comes mostly out of the southwest and it would take it through all the trees. I was wrong. Carol and Kevin pointed out that pollen only goes so far, and so I had to start planting Merino trees among the other trees to make sure I get enough pollinization on the far northeast corner. We also have Sevellano and Baroni. Now most of these are, except for Arbequina, are larger olives and they're very desirable for table olives.
Would you say those first couple of varieties again?
Yeah, Osculana, Mission, Lechino, Frantoio. Lechino and Frantoio are the fancy Cadillac olives for making high-priced olive oil. You can also make table olives out of them. The Arbequina is only good for oil. It's a small olive, and if you try and make table olives out of it, it's mostly pit. But man, it makes good oil. Did that cover what you wanted?
Yeah, I was trying to run it all down.
Are there some varieties that are like the top ones, the best ones in your mind?
Yes, there are. Osculana ranks probably as the best big olive. It's very cold hardy. It's repetitive. It produces just about every year. In other words, it can grow olives and also grow 1-year-old limbs at the same time. So Oskalana is a good producer. Some of the others, though, are so hit and miss that I only keep them because they look so nice.
Are these on your website? Are your varieties that you use, are they on your website?
Are the varieties you use on your website?
No.
No. What was the pollinator that you used? Arena.
There's a Latino. It's about 12 years old, and the trunk is about 12 inches in diameter. But the darn thing didn't produce anything for 7 years. And now as it started to produce, it's kind of hit and miss. They're beautiful trees. They look like they do in Italy. Very gnarled and low to the ground. That's my helper.
You said this last few seasons you haven't had enough olives left to make oil, because people are picking them. Are you making more money though? Are you getting a better price for people picking than you would for the oil?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
It's a quick answer.
Yeah.
You sell for what, $3 a pound or something, don't you?
I sell by the pound, yeah. The making oil is a very labor-intensive thing, the way I have to do it. Now I understand there's a beautiful new over in Georgia.
Where'd you hear that?
And by the way, I've got to take time to compliment these Shaw guys. They're fully covered in terms of their careers. Sam is a banker, and Jason is in insurance. Kevin is the guy who can grow corn out of blacktop roads. And their cousin Marion is the lawyer. And by the way, Jason, when we first got acquainted, he was Jason Shaw. Now he's the Honorable Jason Shaw, and part of the Georgia legislature. That's sure not going to hurt the olive industry in Georgia, I don't think.
No.
The production from individual trees varies quite widely, both because of variety and the climate or the temperature and rainfall on a given year. Somebody asked me about the Coratina trees. Did I have any? Yes, I do. I have a whole line of Coratina. And 3 years ago, one of them produced over 80 pounds of olives off of one tree. And I actually wasn't able to get everything off of it because I was trying to beat freezing weather, and I was doing it at night. That's when I learned my tractor had highlights and lowlights, because I had to do it in the dark. But that tree really produced olives. Others, Oskalana probably produce about 40 pounds of olives. Arbequina, 30 pounds. Now these are trees anywhere from 10 to 15 years old. The rainfall is something that you have to keep in consideration at all times. And frankly, I missed something, and it's hurt my grove, some of the trees, and that is the rainy season we had last year in the first 6 months. at Mariana, we had annual rainfall before the 4th of July. And that resulted in something I didn't know was happening to the trees, and that was fungus. And I was a little bit late to recognize it because when the Georgia people were over 5 or 6 years ago, 3 professors from Tifton came with them, and I asked one of the professors about the lichen that was growing on the trunks of the trees. And he said, no problem, it won't hurt a thing. I said, do I have to do anything to get rid of it? He said, no, it won't hurt. But what it did do is it covered over fungus that was almost the same color as the tree trunk. And when I woke up to my problem in the last half of last year, I started spraying with copper, and to make it even more aggressive, I mixed it with neem oil. So I had a copper neem oil mix, and that really nailed the fungus, because everywhere it was apparent it turned kind of orangish brown, and after a month or so you could brush it off just like dirt. But it did slow down some of my trees and weaken them, and they'll probably take this year to recover. But fungus is one thing you have to watch after. Now, another problem somebody brought up, what about green stink bugs? Well, up until the year before last, my big problem was grasshoppers. And Gainesville entomology people told my county agent, who was handling this for me, the best they could recommend for grasshoppers was carbaryl. So I started in with carbaryl. I was warned, now use it when you need it, but don't overuse it, because it really kills a lot of things. And I used it, and lo and behold, it kept the grasshoppers to an absolute minimum. Last year, or the year before last, we had a season through a large part of the year, which was kind of normal, and the Bahia grass, which is what the orchard grass is, was all green, and whatever weeds there were nice and green, and the grasshoppers had plenty of food. And so, listening to Charles' advice, I didn't spray for grasshoppers because they weren't hurting my trees. Well, lo and behold, I didn't realize using carbaryl I was killing the green stink bugs. But the year before last, I didn't. I didn't use the carbaryl as extensively, and as a result, nearly all of my table olives were damaged by the stink bugs, and I essentially had to call off the use season. So, from a monetary point of view, it's important to watch after the insects and the damage they can do. With regard to fertilizing, frankly, I was a little bit awestruck with Kevin. He's running circles around me in terms of knowing what chemical does what to the trees, because I get by with triple 13, and that's about all I've ever used. But as you can see, it works, and but maybe I don't have enough potash for these lechinos to get them to produce more olives.
How much are you putting out? I mean, what would it equate to per acre, probably?
How much are you putting out?
How much fertilizer are you putting out?
Well, I haven't ever weighed per tree, but my guess would be about a pound to a pound and a half on a tree this size.
Okay.
By the way, as indicated, I do it by hand, and because these trees have gotten so big, and you fertilize just at the drip line on the feeder roots, that's about a 6 or 7 mile walk now to fertilize the trees by hand.
You do it just once a year, fertilize?
Twice a year.
Twice a year.
Yeah, I did it in mid-February, I'll do it again in July. Okay, we've been over the stink bugs and the fungus, well, I can get in, let's see here. There's, what I plant the trees with is a 12-inch auger, and when it goes down about 4 feet, it wiggle waddles around, I end up with about an 18-inch hole. I fill that with the mushroom compost and leave it set for over winter, and it's ideal to plant a tree in. Right around the tree itself, like a 2-gallon volume, I use jungle growth for the actual close-up planting soil around the tree.
Now, how long, I'm sorry.
You've seen those, by the way, a question that probably isn't asked very often, but I do propagate my own trees. And the rule of thumb is you can use 1-year cuttings and put them in, use root tone or something on the bottom of the stem and put it into some mulch. But then you have to mist them almost continuously for about 3 months. And so I started doing it that way, except for manzanilla, which is easy to reproduce. The rest of them, I only got about a 10% success. But lo and behold, olive trees have a unique ability to throw suckers up straight from their roots rather than off the trunk. They do have suckers on the trunk too, but I found if I took a V-shaped weeding tool and popped the root sucker loose from the root and then planted it, they're only about so high, you don't want to push them. The root cells were already on the bottom. You didn't have to go through a couple months of stem cells converting to root cells. And it's increased my success ratio to about 50%, which I understand is not too bad.
On the mushroom compost, you said you put the mushroom compost in the hole. How long do you wait before planting?
Oh, I usually prepare the planting holes in the fall and plant in the spring, like right now.
Okay.
Now, with regard to harvesting, I think that's an Ostalana tree. How big was that?
It's a business card, that's a business card case. So you got about a 12-inch caliper trunk there.
Well, you can see a 20-foot spacing. Actually, when they were younger, I could drive the pickup truck with the trailer behind it through the road, anywhere I wanted to go. Nowadays, I can't hardly get the tractor through because they're all spread out now, maybe 30 feet, and their branches are beginning to intertwine. Now that's on some varieties. On Mission, they're more of an upright tree. They're still not touching. But for Ontario, Latino, and Ostalana are getting pretty thick.
What were your spacings on those, Don?
Well, in Italy, it's 7 meters. I just made it 20 feet.
And you could probably go 20, you could have gone 25 on the Ascalanas and so forth.
Yeah. a 3-year-old tree, a 5-year-old tree, just to give you some idea of what they normally would look like. Oh, I'm pointing to Michael when he was up there about a month ago, the dead fungus. It's kind of rust colored, and you can just scrape it off. By the way, I've sprayed 3 times with just pure copper since I did the neem oil copper, and I'm very determined to kill that damn stuff off completely.
Is a neem oil like a vulture oil or something? I mean, what?
I'm sorry?
What is neem oil?
Is that like a vegetable oil or
Well, neem oil is used for so many things. It comes from Indonesia, and I forgot the name of the chemical that's in it, but it's a fungicide, a matricide, and an insecticide. And there's some human uses to rub it on your skin and that sort of thing. It's a very heavy oil, and it sure does come up a sprayer. The tank that I drag around behind a tractor gets all coated with this goo, which is turned blue because of the copper, and it's a mess to clean out. But it sure did go after the fungus. Oh, I don't know if it shows up color-wise, but here is some, can you see brown limbs anywhere hanging here?
Yes.
That's due to the cold snap we had in January. It did have an effect on some of the older trees, but they are all doing quite well as of now. There's an Arbequina tree. One of the major scaffold limbs died completely. It may have been fungus, but I rather think it was. Anyway, I had to cut it off, and it left this weird looking tree. But this is, if you can imagine, a limb equal to about the size of 2 of these right in here. That's what I had to cut out. That tree is doing quite well right now.
Will it put out a new limb in the opening?
It may. It may get one off of one of these other scaffolds in that direction. If it does, I'll encourage it. Okay, now we get to harvesting. And what we're starting with here is the Italian olive rakes that we use to rake the olives off the tree. Now, this is harvesting for oil. For table olives, you hand pick them. And frankly, while I have a couple hundred customers who hand pick, none of them want me to pick them for them because the grove is kind of a pretty location. And they prefer just walking through the grove and picking their own. And they have a good time doing it. There are picnic tables and benches that they can bring their own picnic lunch if they want, and some people do. I have had as many as 50 people in one group, and as we go through the grove, I caution them, you can pick an olive off the tree, take it home for a souvenir, pick 2 of them if you like, but don't bite into them. Because everybody wants to know, can you eat them just right off the tree? And invariably, with most of the group behind me, sooner or later I hear a scream, and somebody has not listened very well. Have any of you ever bitten into a green persimmon?
Yes.
Well, you know what it will do to your mouth.
So it's the same kind of astringency, just dry your mouth out and,
Yeah, puckers you up so you can't hardly talk.
yeah.
The trees, are your yew pickers bringing ladders?
No, I have ladders.
So you let them up on ladders?
Yeah.
Sir, can you identify a table olives can you identify if you said, oh, that's a table olive, and then you can hand pick? Can your customer can say, this is the table olive, or you can certainly, this is my area of the table olive tree that you can hand pick?
Well, yeah, they pretty well know the variety they're
Okay.
picking. And the Latino, by the way, can be either oil or table, and they're kind of long and narrow, and they resemble the slightly smaller Kalamata. So some of the people pick the Chino to convert into Greek Kalamata type olives with red wine vinegar, because they look just like Kalamata olives. These rakes have probably been that design for the last several hundred years, and I was amazed how well they work. They don't damage the branches, and they do get the olives off. Even the small Arbequina come off with no damage to the trees.
Can you buy that over here in the United States or just in Italy?
I'm sorry?
Can you buy that rake here
No,
or in
typical,
Italy?
They came from Italy to some outfit in California. There's only one, I've forgotten the name, it's Olive something. It's a business that's selling olive supplies, and they're the only ones that carry them. And I'm probably the only one who still use them, because most everybody is going to mechanical operation if they can. Picking into nets. Now this is the net system that I around with the Kubota, and actually this was before it was finished, but it's been sewn together from about a foot from the end there to halfway. And what we do is back the tractor up against the tree to where the crotch hits the trunk. Then the remainder is overlapped, so you're totally covered. The opening that's left up here has a basin put in there, so that after you get all the olives raked, you can lift the net bar here. See, there's a rigid bar at the back of the net, and you can lift it and work all the olives into that hole and forward. They all go into the bin, and bingo, you go into the next tree. It works very well. It takes about 15 minutes per tree to harvest it with rakes and nets.
Are they hardy enough to hit the ground and not really be damaged?
Is it?
The fruits are tough enough to hit the ground and not be damaged?
Well, they hit the net.
Oh, so it's held up a little bit?
Matter of fact, the current net has wings on it that come way out because the trees have gotten bigger from when this was first made. And if they hit the ground, you leave them. They gotta be in the net.
No, I mean, is the net resting on the ground?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so they're still hitting the ground, but I just meant the force of hitting the ground.
Doesn't hurt.
Okay.
What's the role of the tractor in this? I mean, is it just to move the net, and then you put the net around the tree by hand?
Yeah, it works best with a tractor operator and 2 people. And I usually have help, 2 other people when I'm harvesting. Here's help harvesting. I don't know if you can recognize this guy with a ponytail here. And this is the Honorable Jason Shaw. I think that was before he was
Honorable.
Anyhow, well, you can see the way the nets are used. The tractor is off to the end there, and the nets are closed and they're rigged. This was when they had their first olive mill, and they were trying to fine tune it, and they used up all their own olives, working with their first olive mill.
Well, that was
And
an
they needed
experience.
more, so they came on over to my group.
I can see my legs were just as pretty back then as they are with a dog bite.
It doesn't look to me like you could get to the very top of the tree with a rake, is that true,
Oh,
or?
well, one of the rakes is on a 10-foot
Okay.
pole. And,
So
you
it's
know,
adjustable.
We can cover the whole place. Okay, here's Oskalana olives that have just been picked. This is a picker's bucket. This is what you hang around your neck when you go out and you pick, and that's what they look like. Oskalana olives come relatives to something like Sevillano. Sevillano are big. Some of them are even bigger than Oskalana, but then they are medium sized as well. They're not all like they're out of a cookie cutter. And I like the Oskalana because they're almost all exactly the same size. Okay, this is for making olive oil. Here we are making table olives. Now, there are three methods you can use to cure olives. One is water, just water. Change it every day. What you're trying to do is soak polyphenic phenol or something like that out of it that causes the astringency, and get it to just a plain olive. And water will do it in about a 3-month period if you change the water every day. If you use brine, salt water, you reduce that time to about 3 weeks. If you use sodium hydroxide lye, it can be done in 12 to 18 hours. And so that's what commercial people use, that's what I use. And it's not too apparent in this picture, but the reason these baskets are set on top of each other is because there is a Lexan plate on top of the olives, and you have to keep all the olives submerged while you're curing them. You can't let them be exposed to the air. So doing it in this fashion, I keep all the plates well down on top of the olives. Okay, here's the
Don, on the brine method, are you changing the water every day, changing the brine every day?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Here is a bunch of Oskalana in a crock. You can't see it, but there is a Lexan plate on top. This bright spot in the middle is the handle to lift it, but that keeps them all under the brine. Well, in this case, they've been cured. They're in brine. Once they're cured, after with Oskalana, they're more tender than any of the others. Probably 8 to 12 hours 8 to 10 hours would do it with them. Mission takes 12 hours. Some of the tougher olives take 18 hours in lye before they're cured. And we find that if we stop on the olives, the test is you slice the olive right alongside the pit, and when it's yellow-green all the way to the pit, it's cured. We stop when there's a little bit of white, uncured olive next to the pit, because we find they coast, just like a roast in an oven. When you turn the heat off, it'll coast. So will the curing of the olives. That way they stay hard and succulent, but they're still very, very delightful. Yes, ma'am.
Do you find any taste difference in the three methods? The water or the salt or the lye? Is there anything that, does it alter the taste in any way?
I would doubt it very much.
Okay.
I have never used water for 3 months.
Okay.
A neighbor of mine, who grew up in Sicily, his wife uses, she slices the olive or crushes it first. Then she uses hot brine, boiling salt water, and she does it in a shorter period. But I can tell you, I like mine a lot better than hers. It's better if you get them totally sweet before you brine them, because actually, most of my customers have settled on just brining the olives. I used to put garlic and fennel in the brine to add a different flavor, and they're quite good. But just plain brine olives are very good. They're very buttery, and you want them so when you bite into them, they pop a little bit. Now, let's see what else we got here.
What kind of shelf life do they have after they're cured?
I'm sorry?
What kind of shelf life? Oh, there you go.
Oh, I've had them 2 years.
Are they canned? Are they sealed?
No, they're not. You don't boil them or anything. You just cure them. And when I bottle them, in very heavy brine, about 1.5 pounds of salt per gallon. And when I fill the jar, I fill it a little bit overfull with olives. I fill it then until the brine runs out. Then when I put the lid on it and push down on the overfill, it squeezes out absolutely every bit of air anywhere. And if you keep the pressure on as you tighten the lid, it's totally airless. And when you bottle them up that way, they'll last for 18 months to 2 years. Now they will soften a little after a year, but they won't go bad. They're just not as succulent as when in the first year.
What salt are you using?
Unionized salt, the cheapest salt there is. I hope when I'm finished with this session, all of you get the feeling that anybody can get into growing olives. And if you take it one step at a time, you don't know quite where it's going to lead you, particularly if you're a real aficionado and you're in love with olives and you like to grow things. This is a very satisfying business to be in. The picture in front of you shows several different types of olives and methods of canning them and sealing them. Since they're all in heavy brine, they'll last for a long, long time.
What is the perfect storage after you put it in the bottle? What's the perfect storage temperature you're gonna put all this bottled olives? Cold areas or normal temperature?
When you store it, what, do you store it in a cool area? Do you store them after they're bottled?
Well, actually, I guess the ones that I've got that are kept that were 2 years old ended up in the refrigerator. But you don't have to. Just don't let them sit in the sun. Keep them at 70 degrees and they'll last and last and last.
Don, if you could only grow 2 trees in your small yard for table olives, which 2 would you choose?
Probably Oskalana and a Mission.
And when they work together to pollinate each other?
Well, Oskalana is as nice as it is. These are Oskalana here. is self-sterile,
Self-pollinate?
and the mission is self-fertile, so it will fertilize the Ascalana.
Oh, okay.
And it's also good for table olives because it's a medium-sized olive. And if you want to make oil, if you got enough of them, you can make very good oil out of mission. Matter of fact, back in '08, they had a international olive oil festival down in Fort Lauderdale. And when the manager of that festival found out there was an olive grove in Florida, he got a hold of me and induced me to come down there and bring some olive oil that I had made. And there were people there from the usual Italy, Spain, Greece, but Turkey, Peru, Tunisia were also there, and California, obviously. And my oil ended up, they have 3 categories: delicate, moderate, and robust. And in each category they have a bronze, silver, and gold. And my oil got a bronze in delicate. And it was half mission and half Arbequina.
Is there a good,
And those two are very similar in taste.
is there a good source for trees?
Kevin, is there a good source for trees?
Well, yeah, I mean, we get a lot of trees through Santa Cruz Nursery, and Bruce Galino out in Santa Cruz. He does strictly olive trees.
Planting a lot.
We have a number of trees. If you contact the Florida Olive Council, we coordinate with Bruce and several other people. They,
Nurse
actually,
Tech.
the Georgia boys, they have trees too up in Georgia.
Nurse Tech is
Nurse Tech's
got
another one
plenty of
over there.
trees.
So if you contact Florida Olive Council and you want trees, we can get trees for you.
That answer your question. Okay. Now, with regard to, well, let's see. I think we've got to go back. To here. Let's talk a little bit about making olive oil. The way they've done it for the last 2,000 years. First of all, when you bring the olives in, first of all, you let them ripen. And that's a bit of an art, trying to decide when a given tree is ready to harvest, because both the mission and the Arbequina, you'll find anything from dark purple to green at the same time. They don't all turn. The only one that ever turned all at the same time was Manzanilla, which is a beautiful olive. It just won't survive where I am. Anyway, you break all the olives into the net, dump the nets into a basin, dump the basin into a big crate, bring the crate in, and start washing the olives in the first sink. If you fill the sink up a couple times with water, you'll float off just about everything that is foreign to the olives. The olives are heavy enough; they'll stay down. All the crud will come off. After you've done that and they're clean, you put them into the next sink, and the next sink has got, as Kevin pointed out, they have a hammer mill, and I have a hammer mill as well. And there it is. Most of you would call it a Super King garbage disposer. I had another one, it was only 3/4 horse, and it would go off on high temp, so I bought a more powerful one, and it does the job. It produces a paste that comes out through this tube into a bucket. And there's the kind of bucket you use. As a matter of fact, while I'm at it, if you're going to get involved in this, and to any large extent, instead of using plastic buckets and that sort of thing, stainless steel is much easier to keep clean. It cleans up quickly and completely. Anyway, this tube ends into a bucket like that, and one sinkful of olives will just about fill that bucket up with a paste, or what do they call it, pumice. And then you've got the malaxing, and as Kevin indicated, malaxing is very important. And what is malaxing? Well, that's Italian for kneading. And in this case, we've got a situation where the bucket full of paste is placed on this lower shelf. Right underneath this hole. Here's the paddle that I've got in my hand. This member is raised vertically and locked in place.
You gotta point to that screen. We can't see the computer.
Okay. This member here is raised up and locked in place, and it faces this hole. The paddle, of course, is not there, and a half-inch variable speed electric drill is clamped to this vertical post, and this paddle is brought in from underneath and chucked into the variable speed drill, and you leave it turned on and slowly kneads the malaxes, the paste, for about 45 minutes. And I've tried to speed it up at times and shorten the malax period. And it really has an effect on the oil production, because apparently kneading the paste causes the oil in the water that's finally dispersed to accumulate into larger goblets, and they separate out more easily when you put the pressure on it. Now there's, the press is too heavy, so I didn't bring it with me, but here's where the two sinks are. There's an operating gallery here. It goes on to the other end of the tractor board. Here's where the malaxing occurs. Now this is the press, which is hydraulic. It will deliver 20 tons of pressure. And underneath the press is the press tub. That's okay. This may be the very same one that's in the picture there, which has an outlet on it. This press tub sets on a heavy, I don't know if you can see it, a heavy steel plate. In other words, when you begin pressing, the plastic doesn't see any pressure because the plate underneath supports it. And what do you put into the press? Well, here's what you put into the press. First of all, you take a plate like this and put it down, and then put a frame on top of it. And then you fill it with the paste that has been malaxed and kneaded, and fill it up level. I got ahead of myself. This goes over it before you fill it up. And this is netting that surrounds the package of malax paste. And when you've got it full, you just flip the ends over on it and make a package out of it. Take the frame off, and you've got a package of paste setting on his plate. This frame sits inside of the pressing tub. And you put the package of paste in like that, and it'll be about 1.5 inches high. You stack about 6 of them like that. And then you take another steel plate, similar to the one that the tub is sitting on, and put it on top of the top package. And then you start in with the hydraulic press. And slowly at first, but as you get down further, you can go a little faster. And that four-legged thing was an invention of ours that speeded up the process about 1.5 hours, because you don't have to stop and reshift the packages. If they're not in that guide frame, they tend to slip and slide, and you gotta keep them vertical to get the same pressure on them. You end up with about a 2-inch high package of netting on the bottom, and inside of it is the pumice that has been rendered of all the water and oil that's in it. And actually, when you unwrap the netting, you've got a sheet of something that looks like masonite, because it's been compressed so much. The oil is about 20%, and the water is about 80%, and it goes from the drain on the press tub into a receiver like this, and it you just leave it set on the floor, and the oil runs out into it. You can see the oil and the water both coming out. When this is full, you can tell if you've been successful, because about the top fifth will be kind of green gold. It's very pure olive oil. And then the question is, how do you decant it out? Well, I stole another idea from the Italians, and I reverse decanted with water under pressure, just a garden hose, and that fitting goes on here. And of course, the water goes all the way to the bottom of this container and starts putting pressure from the bottom up. So the oil comes out of this spout and right into the bottom. And at the juncture between the oil and the water, you've got a thin, if you've malaxed right, you've got a very thin layer of emulsion. And when that starts getting up to the top here, you get your clean bottles away and get it in another container, because it'll come out with emulsion mixed with it, which you want to separate out in a different fashion.
What is the emulsion? What is that?
It's olive oil and water.
Oh, it's just a mix of the two, okay.
Yeah.
Question.
It's just a mixture of the two, and it's what malaxing is intended to reduce the amount of it.
When you're going through this process, do you lift out your pressed contents before you drain it off, or do you leave it sitting? Does the agitation of pulling it out make a difference?
Well, the oil and water drain out continuously while you're pressing.
Okay,
Okay?
okay.
So when you're all done, you've got these solid, heavy nets with pumice in them that's totally almost dry, kind of like wood.
But so it's left in there while the whole process is going on?
Yeah.
Of draining?
Right, yeah.
So you do 6 at a time or so, and then when that's done, you take out the net and then
Yeah,
put 6 more in?
It's a batch process.
Yeah.
And when you're done, you've got to take the nets out,
Mhm.
get the pumice out of them, and they hang them on a fence, take a garden hose and hose the nets to make sure you get everything out of them, that they're clean again, and then you can start all over. That's why olive oil costs $25 a half liter.
Do you reuse your pumice on your trees like they do?
I did, and it works to an extent, but actually, for years I've used a mushroom compost from Quincy.
Yeah.
They went out of business a couple of years ago, but somebody picked it up.
Yeah, they're back again. We use it for our garden.
Yeah.
Do you just top dress with it?
Yeah, but what's happening is olive leaves, you see, olive trees are evergreen. Kind of like live oaks, you know, they stay green all winter. Now with live oaks, they shed all their leaves when the new ones come out. With olive trees, they shed only the 3-year-old leaves. But there's enough leaves and they're kind of like magnolia trees. They never disappear, they decay. And over the years, they're forming a mulch. You know, if you're trying to retain water, they'll help retain the water, just the leaves they shed.
What do you do with the paste afterwards?
What do you do with the pumice?
After you're done?
I actually, there's enough oil in it, actually, that you could use it for fire starter. But that's a mess, and I just pile it up and chop it up and spread it around under a tree. That's about all I've done. One of the local restaurants, a 5-star Italian restaurant for Rucci's in downtown Panama City. He's a friend. He wanted all my used pumice to use in his pizza oven. And
to burn?
I
To
don't
burn?
think, I'm sorry?
To burn it?
Yeah, it burns, it's like a
Okay.
fire starter.
And I think it was a good advertising gimmick, but I don't think it really made much difference in the pizza.
How much oil would you get from your bucket right there? How much oil would that produce? One bucket?
How much oil is in that one bucket? Quantity.
This is a 5-gallon bucket, right?
Yeah.
So if it's like that much, you got about a gallon
Well,
of
from
oil.
From his
In the
silver
metal
bucket, you know, from your
Oh,
ground to.
from the pumice, if you took one bucket full of pumice, right, one stainless steel bucket full of pumice, how much total oil is from that pumice, do you think?
Well, I can't answer
But
that
from your
question.
olives, you know,
I've never
to
tried it.
produce
But
your-
I do know in Italy and Spain, they process the pumice just to get the rest of the oil out. If you heat it up, I think they use high-pressure steam and hot water, and they can get the oil out, which will float to the top of the whatever water they're using, and they recover as much as they can that way.
That's the other oil they're saying.
How much,
But that's not.
It depends on the olive, and it depends on the type of olive, it depends on the maturation of the olive, it depends on the water content of the olive, so it's very difficult to say, I've got a bucket full of pumice, how much oil do I get? It depends on a lot of factors.
That would be the
How much
same
pressure you
if we're
put
trying
on
to
it.
compare just a bucket full of olives versus how much oil you're gonna get from it. It
Correct,
just depends.
yeah, different olives, different content.
Chicken and steak.
Okay. I don't want to be critical of the state of Florida, but I've got to mention that for years I've tried to get IFAS to get behind growing olives in Florida. And
Then he adopted me.
my county agent tried to help as much as he could. He was really a wonderful guy, because when I went to the county agent in Bay County, they essentially said, you're an idiot to try and grow olives here in Florida. When I went to Bay County, Brasher said, I don't know a damn thing about olives. That's what he actually said. But I'll give you all the help I can. And so he did. And years later, we were trying to get more support from the state, and I was on an email or two that was carbon copied to me, where Brasher was involved, but somehow that carbon copy email got connected to a lot of the correspondence between the head of the IFAS and her lieutenants, and I could tell who the naysayers were down in Gainesville. Eventually, though, when Charles emailed everybody, I'm going to stay out of this argument, but I can't argue with success. Goodbye. And shortly thereafter, the head of the IFAS and our two lieutenants came up to the grove, and I entertained Joan Duffy and Williamson, and I think it's Roberts, the head of development, the head of research. And still not a whole lot happened. They were impressed. Matter of fact, they were very happy with what they looked at, but not much happened. But I'll tell you what's really gotten behind the olive business in Florida is greening. That's making the difference. And
You mean citrus greening?
Yeah.
Disease, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Citrus greening, Wayne Lane greening, or whatever you call it.
Push the wheels.
Well, I've only worked for IFAS for 2 months, but I'm interested.
I'm sorry?
I said, I've only worked for IFAS for 2 months, but I'm definitely interested, so.
Well, we were met with the same, skepticism in Georgia as well. I mean, and a lot of it was from, and not our county agent, same situation. I mean, you've met Elvin before, I believe, but anyway, he was just, I mean, he just felt like, we could probably make it work, and, but we didn't receive that from everybody. But actually, the University of Georgia had a lot of people out yesterday at our orchid groves, whatever, and I mean, they're definitely on board now. I mean, they're offering lots of help, which is, I mean, it's critical to being able to get it done. I mean, it's
of course, all of this as it relates to Bay County goes back 15 years. The subsequent successor, I heard him lecture his group in Bay County saying, now if somebody comes in and they want to start growing black roses, you tell them you're going to give them all the support you can. Don't ever tell them they can't do it. So there we are. Oh, the greening situation. Somebody mentioned Jackie Burns. She is a fellow classmate of Louise Ferguson. Now, Louise Ferguson is the lady who wrote what we call the Bible, the Olive Production Manual, and it's in its 2nd or 3rd edition now. And the other gentleman is Paul Wasson, who is an expert globally. He's sought after all over the world where they grow olives to evaluate all sorts of problems with watering, machinery, olive pickers. You can't imagine how many different olive pickers have been invented, and they want Paul to assess them, compare them to the more successful olive pickers. Anyway, Jackie Burns at the Citrus Research Center talked them both into coming to Florida to lecture the citrus growers. And they did. And as Michael mentioned, it's available on the internet. It's about an hour-long session, and it covers just about everything, questions and answers. It was filmed right in place as the conference went on. And when they found out I had an olive grove in Florida, they insisted on coming by to look at it, and they did. That's when the picture was taken.
Mr. Mueller, excuse me, Uncle Don, but Louise Ferguson, now she's the one that's doing all the research on the mechanized table olive harvesting too, right? Isn't she?
Is she?
I'm pretty sure she's real involved in that, which is, I mean, you know, trying to develop a way to do it that doesn't bruise the table olives, and you can, you know, still get table olives without all the labor.
Olive growers.
You can tell who's doing the work.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody. I believe we're going to have a lunch.
We have lunch out here ready to go.
Lunch is set up. We'll be available for questions and answers and whatever you'd like to do. We've also videotaped this, and I hope we'll have this up, I assume, on the website or something.
Yes.
I'll put a link to it.
And we'll have it on our website as well. So,
Right.
I'd like to thank Michael for coming and helping organize this, and our speakers were fantastic. I appreciate it, and hope everybody got as much out of it as I did. So I'd just like to give them all a hand again.